Okay, so what you're hearing now is Miss Yo's voice, and I'm going to start. I promised you that we would do some step-by-step Star Wars drawings. So we're going to start with Baby Yoda. So I've taken my paper and I've folded it in the middle, so I have kind of a little bit of a line. So I've got the one here that's finished, and then we're going to draw over here. So you don't need to do it that way. You can have your paper however you want. Okay. So I'm going to show you what things I have ready, and how I found what I wanted to use. So if you look at Yoda's head, I see I want a circle for his head. So I looked around my house for some things that were circles about the size I wanted. So I had this pepper mill. I could put it down and draw around it. And I had this little sprinkle thing we sprinkle cinnamon on. And I had some bottle caps, and I found a few. Here's one. There's another one. So I decided I like this yellow one the best, and it just came off of my my bottle of vitamin C. Okay, so this is what I'm going to use to help me draw a circle. It's very hard to draw a circle on your own. So I have that. And then I'm going to use a pencil, because I like to use a pencil because I want to erase some things. So you can always go over a pencil with a marker or crayon, or colored pencil if you want to, but if you start with a regular pencil, it's easier to erasing. So I have the pencil, and I also have a black marker. I just have a flare, but any black marker, because I found that worked the best for doing the details like the eyes and the mouth, so when I colored it didn't smear. So I've got those handy, and then I'm just going to use crayons. I just use crayons for the coloring. I have bunches of crayons. And so I usually just do spread them around like that so I can see the colors easier. It lets me pick them faster. So I'm going to just put all those things over to the side. So in order to get started, you could pause the video, and you could go and pick out something that you want to do to use for your circle maker. Okay, and then come back and start up again. So what I'm going to do is, because Baby Yoda is kind of short, right? Because he's just a baby. So I'm just moving my my bottle cap about halfway down the page, and I'm going to hold it with one hand. I'm going to draw around it with the other. We've done some things like this at school. And then I'm going to pick it up and check it to see, like, oh, I missed a little spot there and a little spot there. So I'll put it back down so I can see my pencil line again. Sometimes I have to move it around a little bit. And then I'll just go around it again and check again. Did I get everything? That's pretty good now. Okay, so I'm done with that. I'll put that over to the side. So we made the head. Now we're going to make the ears. So if you look at the ears are kind of a triangle. They're made by the side of his face, and then the line comes out away from his head, away from the circle, and then comes back. So it's just kind of a pointed, like the letter V sideways kind of, okay? Or a triangle. And there's one on each side of his head. So we're going to make the first one. One of the things I think can sometimes make it easier to do something like this is to make little marks where you want to start and end. So you might be able to see, I'll make this one a little bigger here so you can see where I made that mark. So somewhere near the top of the head, we're going to start with this one. Near the top of his head, I'm going to make just a little mark where I want that ear to start from. And then I'm going to come down toward the bottom and make a mark where I want it to end. I haven't left myself a lot of room for a big giant ear, but I'm going to try that. So I'm going to put my pencil on my one dot, and I'm going to move my pencil out, almost straight out to the side, really, to make his ear. So I'm going to come out, and then I'm going to draw down to that dot. So I'm going to put my pencil here and just draw down to that dot. Okay, so that looks kind of like an ear, right? So now I'm going to just put a couple dots on the other side. I'm kind of matching them with that, but if they're not the same, I don't worry that much. You know, even real people, our ears aren't exactly the same. So I'm going to do the same thing, only I'm going to move out. My line's going to go out and down this way. So I'm going to go out to make his ear, and then I'm going to come down to this other mark that I made. So now I kind of have his face. And the next thing I'm going to do is make that big old collar that he has. It sort of snuggles his head. So it's really a rectangle. Do you see that? As I trace my pencil around, it's a rectangle. And that rectangle comes up onto the circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my rectangle so it comes right up to the bottom of those ears. So I'm going to start my rectangle, I'm going to come up, and I'm going to come over, and I'm drawn right over the circle, okay, and I come down, and I go back over. So there's my rectangle. And this is where you might want to, if you're using pencil, you might want to erase. Now, if you're not using pencil, that's okay. If you're going to color it in, it's probably going to cover that line up anyway. But the reason we erase that line is really the collar part. It would be in front of his head, in front of his head. So it overlaps, it blocks off the bottom of his face because it's in the way. And so we just go ahead and get rid of the parts that wouldn't show, okay? So the next thing we're gonna do is this body comes down, over, and back. It's really kind of a rectangle, but it gets a little wider. If it goes straight up and down, though, if you do it straight up and down, that's okay too. So I forgot to tell you, I meant to tell you, sorry. This black thing that you see is the stand that's holding my phone up for me. So it's just a tripod. So sometimes it kind of gets in the way, but I'm just going to go ahead now and draw. So I'm going to draw it very lightly. So I hope you can see it. So I'm going to draw out, and I'm going to come across, and I'm going to go back. When I look at that one, I think, like, you know what? This one's fatter and shorter, and I think I like that better. So I'm going to just go ahead and come out a little farther. So I'm just going to fix it. I don't like what I did as well, so I'm going to go out a little farther, stop a little higher, go across, and come back. So now he's a little fatter looking. And I'm going to go ahead and erase these lines, but again, if you're going to color in, you don't need to do those, but I am going to erase. And that's why I drew light at first, because if I don't push hard with my pencil, I just gently hold it down against the paper, then it works better for me. So then I'm going to go ahead and do an arm, and the arm is really just a line that starts at the collar, comes out away from his body, and then a line that turns and goes toward his body. And I looked at a Baby Yoda picture, and he has pretty big sleeves. So I'm going to start up here, so I'll make a little dot where I want to start. And if you want to make a dot where you want to end, you could do that too. So I'm going to make a dot, and I'm going to come out kind of far. I'm just moving farther and farther away from his little dress thing. And when I get to where that line, that dot is, I can come over like that. Okay, and then to make his hand, it's just a little curved line, but let's make the other arm and then we'll do the hands together. Okay, so I made that sleeve. So now here I can make another dot, and I can make another dot. So I'm going to start that sleeve and come out away from his body, and then come to touch the body skirt part. Okay, so now the arms are really just a little curved line that goes from the bottom of his sleeve to his little dress thing, cloak thing, whatever it's called. And if it's hard for you to draw a curved line, it's okay to draw a straight line. See, if I draw it, that's a little curved too, but I can draw a straight line, and it still will look like a hand to people because we're going to color it green, so you don't have to worry too much about that. I'm going to mark where I want the eyes to go. Now you do it very lightly. Well, babies have big eyes. They have bigger eyes, and their eyes appear bigger in their heads than they do in ours and grown-ups, okay? So I have them there, and I decided, you know, well, maybe that's okay, as I want to have a little smile there too. So I can do that, but if I want to, I might want the eyes to be a little lower. So this is, again, where I'm glad I have my eraser. I erase that. I'm just going to draw him a little bit lower so he looks more snuggled down into his little collar there. Okay, so you see I didn't get them very even, so what I do, I'll just kind of adjust those. It's very hard to get matching eyes, so if you wanted to, you could probably go use a hole punch, if you had a hole punch, and punch a couple of little black dots and glue those on. You could do that, but I just try and adjust them. Let's move that little mouth down a little lower, like that. So now what I'm going to do before I do anything else is I'm going to use the marker, and I'm going to color in those eyes. So I'm going to do one, and I usually will go in a little smaller because that lets me, if I don't get them the same, it lets me adjust them more. So I'm going to go ahead and fill all that in. And I'll take a look at them and I'll decide if they are matching. That one goes down. I can already see this one goes down a little more. So I can come back to this one, just make it a little bigger, make it go down a little more so it matches that one a little bit better. So it doesn't have to be a perfect match. That's close enough. And I'm going to make his little smile. So now I'm ready to color it in. So I'm going to bring my crayons back over here so you can sort of see them. Let's see here. And I am going to pick brown for his clothes and green for his skin. I think that's all I need for him. So I'm going to start with his head. So I'm going to just, one of the things I like to do when I'm doing with crayons or marker is I will retrace my pencil line with my marker or my crayon where I want the outsides to be. Okay. And then I'm just going to start to color it in. When I'm doing big areas, I move my hand back and forth a long ways. I move it back and forth. And when I'm doing a smaller area, I'll show you when I do down here. I do that a little bit different. Okay. And then can color in the face, the head. So this is where I like that when I use the marker, it doesn't smear. I tried it with pencil and I tried it with crayon, and both times it sort of smeared his head. So I'm going to just draw a color a little darker at the bottom of his ear. That makes it look a little bit more like there's shading on it. So I just went over that crayon a little bit more. So I do the cloak part. I'm going to just do the same thing. I'm going to trace it with the brown. See how I didn't quite get it right there? So I'm just going to go back over and do that a little bit more. And I see there's a little, I notice there's a little kind of an overlappy line on it. So if you just draw a line in any way on there, that should work. And then I'm going to just color that in. When you go to color something like this, when you have a big area like this, I'm going to just do this part, big area like that. And I'm going to wave this so it looks a little bit more like it's made out of cloth. So I just wiggled my line. So after I do that outline, I usually will go along the edges slowly and carefully, and see how I'm just wiggling my crayon a little bit, just a little back and forth, and that lets me control it more so I don't accidentally go over the line. If that's something that's a problem for you, you can put something down, like if I hold a pencil here, that can help keep me from going over the line if I have a problem with that and that bothers me. Or you can just put your finger of your other hand there maybe. But if it goes over a little bit, that's okay too. But when I have a big area, so if I'm doing an edge, see, I'm just moving a short way back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to color in. But when I have a big area to do, I move my whole hand back and forth, like that. Okay, till it's evened up. Alrighty, and then I do the sleeves. I'll do the same thing. It's kind of little, but it's long, so I can make some longer strokes. Okay, and here. And I see I accidentally went a little too far with that, so I'll color a little darker in here to make it look sort of a little shadowy. And that sort of covers up that mistake that I made. I can do some darker areas. And then the only thing I have left are his hands. So let me go ahead and switch around to the side. And I got one green hand and another green hand. And there we have our two Yodas. See how they're not, I drew both of these, see how they're not just the same? And that's just how drawing is. So that is Yoda.